Jeanette Mott Oxford is currently the Executive Director of the Missouri Association for Social Welfare and a former member of the Missouri House of Representatives. Jeanette was the first openly gay member of the House, and in this interview discusses the state of her personal health, as well as the health in the LGBTQ community.
I do believe that the oppression of our society of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons does have a high impact on our health, and that it has had an impact on me. For one thing, when I was younger, I was born in 1954, there weren't many places that LGBT folks could go to congregate except gay bars. When I was a college student age person, well, I guess people can go to college at any age, but I mean, when I was fresh out of high school and headed off to college in my 20s, gay bars were places where there was a lot of smoke and a lot of alcohol. And if your whole kind of like social life revolves around places where there will be drinking and smoking, I think it does tend to cause a higher smoking rate and a higher alcoholism rate in the LGBT community than would be true otherwise. Fortunately now there are a lot more choices. There are gay-straight alliances in high school and in college settings. There are often support groups or social clubs that people can go to where they have healthier outlets. There are even sports teams that people can participate in, often that are connected to sexual orientation or gender identity. So it's a little better now, I think, than it used to be around healthy places to congregate. I also think that that there was a part of me as a teenager who didn't particularly want to date guys, who saw my weight problem as a salvation for me, as something that kept me from being hit on, that's something that gave me some protection. And I think that probably exacerbated my existing problem relationship with food. Well, I think that there is still stigma connected to being lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. I think unfortunately, young people who are surveyed report having thoughts of suicide at rates that are alarmingly high, and that it's up to all of us to create a more free and open society that's supportive of young LGBT folks so that they do not feel that suicide is an option that they should consider. I think there's still a lot of pressure to drink and smoke and use illegal drugs. And that part of that is, as long as people feel that they are excluded from sort of like mainstream society, then the need to act out with those kind of substances may seem especially attractive if they aren't seen as mainstream. It's sort of like, if I can't fit in here in X box, I'm going to go fit in Y box instead. And if the people in Y all drink, smoke, and use, whatever, heroin or even marijuana or cocaine or whatever, then perhaps there's more pressure put on you to do that, because it seems to be the common thing that bonded folks who live in Y land. Certainly, I got out of high school without starting smoking, but because I was hanging around other lesbian and gay people at that point, I hadn't discovered transgender people in my 20s as folks that were out there, but I was hanging out with a lot of lesbian and gay identified people, and almost all of them smoked. And so I started smoking, even though I had gotten past the normal age for people to start smoking. In Missouri, unfortunately, the average smoking, the age to initiate smoking is like 11. So I could have gotten past that entirely, but because of the social group that I was hanging out with, there was a lot of pressure on me to smoke, and I began that then. So I think that's still there to a certain extent, pressure to use mood-altering substances, the fact that people feel some pressure on their lives around things like, can I find a job if I'm out, or do I need to hide the fact? Anytime there's pressure on people to be dishonest, I think it creates stress that people are apt to try to treat with illegal drugs or alcohol, or smoking because people associate smoking with calming down. I think what they don't realize is the feeling of being uncalm is about your withdrawal from nicotine, and then you relieve it by, ingesting some more of the substance that you're withdrawing from. So even the feeling that you're not calm, it's not that you're not calm and smoking helps it, it's that you go into withdrawal and then smoking helps it, I think. Beyond the special issues that LGBTQ folks have related to health, things like the way that real oppression can create trouble for people finding employment or having legal rights around their relationships. The fact that they partner, there are a lot of rights that are denied to same-sex couples that are there for other couples. That can create a lot of stress that has health consequences. But LGBT folks, because of the legal inequality that's there, we don't have protections around employment, housing, and public accommodation in Missouri, for example. That means that we are more apt to have a high poverty rate in the LGBTQ community, which is not something that everybody recognizes. If you have trouble finding employment and a lot of the access to health benefits, to health insurance, goes through your employer, then that means a lot of LGBTQ folks may be living without health insurance. Now, the Affordable Care Act is going to change that some, and we hope it changes it a lot, since there are over 800,000 Missourians who don't have health insurance. So one of the things that the Missouri Association for Social Welfare is doing is we're pressing for health care for everyone. We believe in a health care system where everybody's in and nobody's out. We think that a national single-payer system would be the most cost-effective way to do that. Most industrialized nations do have a national single-payer health system, sort of like Medicare is for older people in the United States. So that's something for which we advocate. We also advocate for parity between physical health and mental health. We greatly underfund the mental health system in Missouri, and we would like to see our state address its inadequate, outdated, and unfair tax system so that we have enough revenue in order to provide adequately for essential programs like mental health. Well, I think the two biggest issues for the LGBTQ community that I saw as a state legislator was one, that we don't have civil rights protections in Missouri around employment, housing, and public accommodation. So we were trying to win something that we called MONA, the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, in order to fix that problem. That's something that we haven't won yet, but it's been introduced as a bill for a number of years now, and every year there's more sponsors of that bill, and it's a bipartisan effort now with both Democrats and Republicans sponsoring the bill. So hopefully this will be the year that we'll finally pass the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act. The second issue that we saw was a lot of school bullying. A whole lot of LGBTQ youth report being picked on at school about their sexual orientation or their perceived sexual orientation or their gender identity. And there's been a lot of fights about that in the state legislature. There are those that say, oh, we don't need to have any kind of a system where you break out kinds of discrimination of kids. Instead, we just need to have a zero tolerance policy around bullying. Well, that would be lovely, but that's not how it works. We can claim we have no tolerance about bullying, but unfortunately, unless there's some training for principals, for administrators, more broadly like superintendents, and for teachers and for everyone that works in schools, whether it's the folks in the lunchroom or the people that drive buses, there needs to be some training so that folks know that there really is zero tolerance of all kinds of bullying. Because in a school system that claims that, in St. Louis Public Schools, which were the schools that I had in my district as a legislator, I actually sat down with a principal to talk about the bullying that a young woman who perceived herself to be lesbian was experiencing in that school. And the principal's reaction was, well, you shouldn't have told anybody. That's a totally unacceptable reaction from a principal. And I complained to the superintendent about that reaction, and I think they've improved some, but unless you do have enumerated categories about kinds of oppression and training for folks to know that bullying related to those kind of human categories is unacceptable, how to spot it, what to do about it when it happens, then a lot of things are going to happen in schools that really wound young people deeply. Well, I would love to see our whole community, not just LGBTQ folks, but the broader community as well, take seriously their role in interrupting bullying when they see it happen. We should all stand up for people who are being bullied instead of seeing it as some rite of passage. Unfortunately, at the time when I co-sponsored legislation on the bullying issue, and we've had some press conference on it, sometimes somebody in the media, a reporter, would say, well, hey, I was bullied as a young person. You know, they picked on me because I wore glasses. Or, you know, because I was chubby or whatever. And so people kind of blow it off as they get older and say, well, hey, everybody's bullied. It's not so serious. And they forget how hard that was. We need to remember how hard it was and say, you know, instead of telling every young person, well, hey, just get over it. You know, everybody's going to be bullied. Why not get committed to actually creating a world where bullying doesn't happen? That would be the better way to go about it. But unfortunately, I think a lot of adults forget just how painful that was. We need to instead remember how painful it was and get committed to saying no more. Well, I think that's something that everybody can do, again, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity, is be an active citizen who pays attention to what's going on. I think a lot of folks totally check out of the political system and get apathetic about it. They feel somewhat hopeless, and I can understand why that is. Certainly many things that happen in politics frustrate me. But unless we stay informed by reading those little things that come in the mail from our legislators about what's happening in this session, filling out the surveys that they send about what we want to see what happens, going to town hall meetings where you can actually interact with your state representative and your state senator and your federal legislators too, have those kind of meetings, then you don't know what all the opportunities are where a citizen's voice could actually make a difference. So I think it's important that we pay attention, that we read the newspaper or online editions of the news, that we listen to radio news or television news in order to know something about what's going on. And that even more so that we actually get to know our elected officials and that we vote every single time in every primary and every general election. A whole lot of folks say, oh, the primaries don't matter, but they matter a lot. So it's important that people pay attention to what's going on, get informed, maybe work with your neighbors to put on a candidate forum where you actually ask candidates, what would you do to see that we fund health care adequately to reduce those 800,000 Missourians who don't have health insurance? What would you do to see that bullying in school ends for LGBTQ youth, and see what they have to say about things like that? We can pretend that things will get better without our effort, but the truth is it doesn't get better unless we organize and take action. I'm a person who's had a weight issue pretty much my whole life long. I was the chubby kid in school and all, but in recent years, especially since 2005 when I was sworn in as a member of the Missouri House of Representatives, I began to gain weight pretty rapidly until I got up to a high that I know of 431 pounds. But in October of 2010, I became convinced that it was time to make some changes, and I started attending a support group in December of that year, started eating consistently on a food plan recommended by a nutritionist that my doctor sent me to, and over the last 3 years I've lost 136 pounds. Certainly I had known for years that my eating was out of control, that I was gaining weight constantly, and it was a very kind of frightening situation for me. It was to the point that I basically wouldn't go to see my doctor unless she promised not to make me weigh while I was there. And since I started to have high blood pressure in 2001, it was important that I see my doctor, and she was smart enough to say it's more important that you come in quarterly and let me check your blood pressure and make sure that I get your meds right than that I make you weigh. So I won't make you weigh. You can come on in and see me and just tell the nurse I don't weigh. And so we did it that way until I started to actually want to know what I weighed, because I wanted to see if I'd lost some weight. I only weigh when I go to the doctor's office, so I only find out about twice a year how I'm doing at this point. So what happened is in 2010, there were sort of like three things that happened. The first thing that happened is a friend of mine who has a cocaine problem stole money from me and then confessed that she stole money from me. and made amends to me by paying the money back. And in talking with her about this situation where she'd stolen from me, I went, you know, I act about food just like she acts about cocaine. And I started to wonder if there's something that's like an addiction in how I relate to food. So the second thing that happened is I had to go have carpal tunnel surgery on my right hand. And the doctor who I was there to see about hand surgery said, "Do you want to lose weight?" Well, it was kind of like none of her business. I'm there for hand surgery. But she had some theories about weight loss, and it was another time to kind of like draw that attention, to that issue for me. The third thing is my pastor said, "I'm noticing that you're not moving as well as you used to move, and you seem to be in pain a lot. Is there something I can do?" And I said, "I don't think there's anything that anybody can do for me, but I certainly welcome you praying for me." And then the fourth thing that happened is that a friend who's very overweight invited me to a support group for people who are overweight, and I decided to attend. So it was those four things kind of unrolling over a period of several months that led me to take a risk on doing some things differently. When I first started to make some changes related to my health, I received a lot of encouragement. People told me that they'd been worried about me for a while, that they certainly had seen that I'd been gaining weight and that I was having trouble moving. And lots of folks, asked me, how can I be helpful? And lots of people told me that they were very excited that I wanted to make changes and that they wished me every success because they wanted to see me around for the long haul. A whole lot of folks told me that they thought that work that I had done on a variety of social justice issues, including LGBT equality, had been meaningful to them and important to them, and they didn't want to see me die young. I work on a very simple method of staying in the day that I'm in instead of thinking about the future, and I just follow my food plan, and that makes it very simple. As long as I follow the food plan, it doesn't get complicated and hard. If I should go, oh, it's Christmas time, or it's Thanksgiving, or it's the 4th of July, I think I'll change how things go for today, then it kind of gets hard. But as long as I just kind of like say, it's today, I'm going to stay in today and eat on my plan today, it's pretty easy. I'd say the hardest thing was to get going in 2010 around believing that it might be different because I had so many examples of failure, so to speak. I'd tried to lose weight a lot of times. I'd lost weight for a little while and then started eating on my old patterns and put the weight back on and some more with it. So the hardest part, I think, was having some hope that it could change. I'm now at a stage where I've actually had my knees replaced and one hip replaced, and I'm walking without pain that I had in the past because of those joint replacements and because of the weight loss. And so now I'm adding some exercise to the nutritional changes that I made. And now I'm just basically using a simple walking program. So it's important that I combine good nutrition with an exercise program in coming days. And I'm committed to staying in my support group that's been very helpful to me. I had actually lost 100 pounds before, but as I said, I didn't do that in the most healthy ways in the past. When I was in my 20s, I lost about 100 pounds, but I did it through a very restrictive calorie counting method where I thought I'd had a good day if I ate 500 calories. And what I probably did is kind of messed up my body's metabolism by under-eating, making my body think that I was starving, and then that can have some negative consequences. So I'm using a much more careful, balanced, slow weight loss method currently, and I think that's better for my body overall. I think that it is very helpful to talk to your doctor and your nutritionist, and that if you find that you don't trust your doctor, see another doctor. Part of what has enabled me to be in such good partnership with my doctor is the very first day I went into her office, I didn't like her intake form. It asked me to lie about my life as a lesbian. It said, are you single, married, divorced, or widowed, which is what a lot of forms say. Well, Missouri doesn't let me legally marry, and I've been with my partner Dorothy for 30 years now. I've been with my doctor about 10 years now, so I guess I'd probably been with my partner about 20 years at the time that I went into her office. And I told her first thing off, your form doesn't have a place for me to tell the truth about my life, which is that I'm with another woman, that we've been together for a long time. And I hope you'll change your form, because asking your patients to tell less than the truth about themselves is not a good idea, in my opinion. She thought that made a lot of sense. So the very next time I went to see her, she'd changed her intake form and had the whole agency do it, not just like her office, but her clinic belonged to a chain of clinics, and they all changed their intake form so that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people had a better chance of telling the truth about their lives on the forms. So getting with a doctor that you trust, that you can tell the truth to, somebody who'll take time to explain things to you and answer your questions, I think is very important. And then she recommended that I talk to a nutritionist. It's important to also know whether you trust the nutritionist that you talk to. Some nutritionists have actually given some bad advice to some friends of mine, and I've recommended that they go to see somebody else. Basically, what I call bad advice is when a nutritionist tells you something that the place in you that like spots where the truth is, if that spot says, no, that's not right about me, and the person says, oh yeah, it is, then you need to see somebody else, because any healthcare professional we see should listen to us about what we know about ourselves.